Hey everybody, it's Lindsay. This week, in week 3, we are going to be talking about sexual anatomy, physiology, and sexual response. This week we're going to approach it from a binary sort of view. So we're going to talk about males and females. Next week, we'll start to expand our understanding about sort of gender expression and other sort of non-binary genders and representations. But for this week, we'll stick with sort of the, hey, we have boys and girls. And then next week, we'll talk about, hey, what if you're not a boy or a girl? But for this week, we'll focus on first sex organs of sort of typical female and male bodies. So my first question that I always ask is, your sex organs, what are they for? If I do this in class, I generally wait and pause, and most people say, for reproduction, we're going to have babies. Yes, that is something that we do use our sex organs for, but what's the other thing we use our sex organs for? Pause. What? We use them for pleasure, right? In fact, I often ask people, when is the last time that you used your sex organs for reproductive gain, right? Most people are going to say, no, I don't want to use them for reproduction. In fact, I want to do the opposite. I don't want to reproduce. I don't want to have babies. And so why is it that when we think about sex organs, we often think reproduction first, and rarely, if ever, do we think about pleasure? Well, part of that is because of the weird way that our society has contextualized people and their bodies. We don't talk about pleasure, right? Because that's weird. Sex, ooh, no, why would we want to do it for pleasure? But when you come from sort of your K to 12 education through growing up, we often talk about periods and these sort of things so that we can talk about how do bodies work and how do they prepare you to have babies, even though the reality is most of us don't talk about having babies for a very long time, and most of our lives we don't use our sex organs for having babies. Having babies is fine if that's your choice, but for most of us we're talking about our sex organs because it feels good, right? And so in this class we will talk about baby making and some of those other sort of things, but for the most part, most of what we talk about in this class is about pleasure. And so it's really important that we keep that in mind, that our sex organs are there for our pleasure. And that's not bad. This is a sex positive class. We find sex to be good and healthy and rewarding for people. Okay, there's going to be a video you're going to watch that's going to give you sort of the overview of the vulva, of the big picture, sort of what is here in this neighborhood. And then you're going to flip through some different slides in there to look at different parts of the vulva. Some of the things I always like to point out would be your mons pubis. So the mons pubis is the layer of fat that overlays the top of your pubic bone. The mons pubis is an erogenous zone. Erogenous means it gets you excited. It makes you feel kind of exciting. And so the mons pubis is an erogenous zone, meaning that you get pleasure from touching it, from pushing on it, from playing with it. And so oftentimes when we talk about sex, we're very goal oriented, right? We think like, where's the vagina? Let's put something in it, and then boom, we're having sex and it's over. And for me, from a feminist perspective, from a sex educator's perspective, we need to talk about all of the bits and pieces around there, which includes things like the mons pubis, right? Remember back in junior high or high school when you went to dances and you were grinding on people at the school dance because that's what you could do? That was actually doing something for you. You were pushing your mons pubis on somebody, and that feels good. The mons pubis is there to help tell your body, hey, we're getting ready to do something exciting, and that's what gets all of our juices flowing in those sort of things. Hair that is attached to the mons pubis, your pubic hair, is attached deeply in at different sort of roots of your body. And so playing with the hair on your mons pubis, if you have it, can be really good. Next, one of the things I like to point out are the labia. First of all, please don't call them flaps. Oftentimes people call them that. We are not trucks. They are not mud flaps. They are labia. They are lips. And those are there to help provide pleasure as well. When you look at sort of biological reproduction, in utero, an embryo starts out as a non-sexed being. Then depending on sort of the chromosomes and the DNA and the hormones that are exposed to it, you either grow into a boy or a girl, or next week into something that is neither boy nor girl, but we'll talk about that then. And so the thing that happens is the area where your labia or your scrotum start as the same material. right? And so as you grow, if you are a boy and getting boy sort of signals from your DNA and your body, those grow into testicles, right? And what do we know about testicles? Most of us know, just kind of common knowledge, testicles are super sensitive, right? If a guy gets hit in his nuts, he's like, oh, I'm dying. Yeah, well, guess what? On somebody who was born with a vulva, those same material grow into our labia. And so if labia are from the same tissue as scrotums, what should we infer? Oh, they're really sensitive. In fact, some people can orgasm just from having their labia stimulated. And so it's something that we should appreciate. Again, not being goal oriented, not just going right for the vagina, but the labia are there because they're soft and they're tender and they're delicate, and they're something that we should play with and enjoy. The vulva and the vagina is a bigger piece. So the vulva is the overview, vagina is the whole. A vagina is self-lubricating, but it doesn't turn on and off like a hose. And so that's a really important sort of thing. If sex is painful for somebody, it's oftentimes because they haven't warmed up their vagina yet, because people are too goal-oriented. And so we want to make sure that the vagina has enough time to self-lubricate, for the cervix to pull back into your body, and have other sort of things happen before we go in inside the hole, if that's even sort of your goal. Okay. The next picture is of the internal structure of your reproductive system. Most of this does have to do with baby making. This picture is probably a lot more familiar than what you have seen, or it's more familiar because you've seen it a lot, because this is what we usually show in K-12 education. The one thing I like about this picture is that it shows the broad ligaments that keep your uterus in place. I often have students worry that their uterus and their fallopian tubes are just kind of like bonking around in there, like in space. That's why I have this picture of a car lot with one of those little things. Yeah, your uterus isn't doing that. It's firmly in place because of broad ligament. And this shows the different sort of things. Your cervix does move as you are aroused. Your cervix pulls back into the vagina to lengthen your vagina. Right now, if you're not aroused and you have a vulva, if you stuck your fingers into your vagina, you could touch your cervix, but as you get aroused, that cervix pulls back to accommodate anything that you're hoping to put into the vagina. And so that is just an important sort of thing. So again, if you're having sex and you rush into it and it hurts, it could be that your cervix isn't pulled back far enough. And so slow it down, play in the vulva neighborhood, wait for your body to get warmed up before you go sticking anything in anywhere, okay? Let's see. The next picture is the internal structure of the breast. I really like this picture for a lot of reasons, but when we talk about sort of body image and body distortion image of media, oftentimes we think of sort of the perfect body is somebody who is super, super skinny all over, but has really big boobs, right? Well, now that we can look at sort of the internal structure of the breast, it's mostly made of fat. Does it make sense to have our ideal sort of body of women be super big breasts, which are all fat, and then super skinny body? Do people come like that? For sure. That is a naturally occurring thing, but the likelihood that most people are going to look like that is pretty slim to none, right? Most of us are height to weight proportionate, meaning we have equal distribution of fat throughout our body. And so the idea that we've built this sort of ideal female body on an image that doesn't actually make sense is funny to me. Another thing you'll see is that there are milk ducts throughout your breast, and those are really important to notice. A lot of people get an idea that when you're breastfeeding or when your milk comes in, if you're having a baby, it's kind of like a fire hose, and that couldn't be further from the truth. You don't have a fire hose. It's much more like a seeping garden hose. Oftentimes I have people who want to get their nipples pierced, and they ask, like, oh, if I get my nipples pierced, will that, pierce my hole so that I can't breastfeed? Well, if you had a hose of a nipple duct, then yes, but we don't. We have a seeper hose. And so yes, you can pierce your nipples and still breastfeed. They do recommend that you take your piercings out before breastfeeding because it can hurt the baby's mouth. But if that's something that you've been contemplating, great, fine, do it. The other thing that I find to be interesting in this picture is that it gives you a side view, so you can see where the muscle lays against your chest. And so when we think about how boobs sag or move or all of those other sort of things, it's because there's fat sitting on top of muscle. And so you can build up the muscles, but the fat is just going to do what it's going to do. And so that's where we have different sort of breast shapes. If somebody were to get implants, they actually put the implant in behind the muscle, in between your muscle and your rib cage, which is why they stay really taut and firm, and they don't droop. And so it's also why it's really painful, because if you pull a muscle away from your body really hard and stuff something underneath it like an implant, it's going to be painful until that muscle recalibrates to get over those sort of things. Next, thinking about sexual response, there are many cycles of sexual response, many models that people have theorized, but basically they all go like this. You're hanging out, everything's fine, something excites you. It could be a thought, it could be a smell, it could be a vision, it could be a whole bunch of different things. Whatever it is that gets you excited, you get excited and you're like, hey, here I am. We often call this horny, right? And then if it's an appropriate time, you might have an orgasm. If it's an inappropriate time, you might be like, oh, now's not a time to have an orgasm. And so then you're like, well, then I'll just chill back out and we'll go down to resolution, right? That's a pretty straightforward sort of model of sexual response, but it's only something that we've understood for about the past 70 years. Before that, people had no idea how orgasms happen. They just thought it was something that spontaneously happened, which is kind of silly. But now we know that, yes, you can be most of the time chill, something excites you, maybe excites you a lot, boom, orgasm, and then you're like, hey, okay, well, then we'll chill, okay? One of the other things that's important is to know how our bodies work. And so the menstrual and ovarian cycles work together to prepare our bodies for pregnancy. While we may not want to be pregnant, our uterus and our ovaries definitely want us to be pregnant every single month. And so our body every month is like, let's have a baby. And you're like, no, I don't want to have a baby. And you do things to hopefully not have a baby. But every month your body's like, no, but let's try again. And so the video that I have in the lecture slides is about the whole body sort of picture of what it looks like when the menstrual and ovarian cycles are working together. It's a really important video because it's a 3D full perspective sort of view, which I think is really important because it brings us up sort of issues about hormones and how they flood our body, and this sort of idea that like women are so crazy when they are on their periods, right? So that brings up menstrual issues. So the first one I have is what I call unconfirmed science. Menstrual synchrony is the idea that if a whole bunch of women live together, they are going to have their periods all sync up. We know this happens. Why does it happen? We don't actually know. We have enough evidence to say this is something that definitely happens, enough anecdotal evidence. We just don't know why it happens. Our best guess is that it has something to do with pheromones, and that people sort of unconscious sort of hormones swing off together and everybody goes into the similar sort of cycle, probably based on evolutionary sort of stuff. The next thing I want to talk about is PMS. PMS is real. In science and in health, when we talk about a syndrome, so premenstrual syndrome means a whole bunch of things could happen, not necessarily all at the same time, to all the same ways. And so a syndrome is a cluster of different sort of symptoms. And so PMS can be a cluster of symptoms, and we all experience them in different sort of ways. It could be weight gain, it could be bloating, it could be irritability, it could be cramps, it could be acne, it could be all these different sort of things. The reason that I put it in the unconfirmed science category is because although it is real, oftentimes people use PMS as a catch-all to talk about why women are being bitchy. And that is some stupid stuff, right? Women are allowed to have a variation of emotions. We can be mad when people are being annoying. We can be sad when people are mean to us. But oftentimes in sort of our socially constructed world, anytime a woman expresses anything other than like, oh, I'm so happy, we're like, oh God, she's probably PMSing. And that's why I put it in that. It's very important that we determine and distinguish between actual PMS, symptoms that are causing sort of health changes and issues, and hey, I want to control a woman's behavior by chalking up everything to she's probably on her period and so she's just being a bitch for that reason. Okay, we don't want to do that. Other clinical issues would be menorrhagia, which is heavy bleeding. This is not just like, OMG, I need a super tampon. This is like, I need to wear a tampon and a pad and I need to change them every single hour. And maybe I bleed so much that I start to get dizzy and have other sort of things. For most people, menorrhagia is easily helped by taking hormonal birth control. Hormonal birth control helps to even out those fluctuations in your hormones to make it so that you're not bleeding to death or overkill. Dysmenorrhea is serious cramping. Again, this is not just like, oh, I have really bad cramps, but it's like, oh, I can't get out of bed. I need to take narcotics for the amount of pain that I'm in. I can't go to work. It has a severe disruption on my life. A good thing, again, for dysmenorrhea, most of the time cramps help to even out those sort of things. And it's not such a hard thing to solve. Finally, amenorrhea would be lack of menstruation. There are several reasons that we lack menstruation. The first one is when you're pregnant, right? When you're pregnant, all of your uterine lining stays in because that's what is growing into the placenta to help grow a baby. Another reason that people might experience amenorrhea is because they are endurance athletes. So when we think about gymnasts or cross-country runners or ultra marathoners, the percentage of body fat that they have is so low that the body starts to shut down sort of what it considers superfluous systems. And periods are kind of superfluous. You don't have to have them. They're there for a purpose, but when your body is doing other things such as training and trying to build a lot of muscle mass, oftentimes your period will drop off. Doesn't mean you're not fertile, it just means you're not going to bleed because you're not going through the same sort of uterine growth cycle. Finally, the last reason that people might experience amenorrhea is for people who have eating disorders. If you are starving yourself, so anorexia, or you have bulimia and you're really fighting to keep your body in some sort of shape, you might experience amenorrhea. Again, your body is fighting to stay alive at this point, and so it's like, yeah, now's not a really good time to have a baby, and so it will shut down sort of your menstruation. Again, you could still be fertile, you could still get pregnant, but the likelihood is going to be a lot less because your body's really concentrating on just keeping you alive. Finally, when we talk about menstruation, the other one I like to talk about is social taboos. People often want to talk about period sex. From the health perspective, I'm here to say totally fine. There's no reason to not have sex on your period. You're not going to get anything from it. Menstrual blood is actually really clean. It's some of the most pure blood because it's all inside. It's body generated. It's refreshed every month. And so it's actually really clean. You're not going to get any weird sort of gross things from period blood. Period blood can transmit HIV, though it's very, very low risk and very unlikely, and most people don't have HIV. So if you don't have HIV, there's nothing you're going to get from somebody's period blood. That being said, some people are just like, ew, period blood, gross. Why would I do that? To each their own. For some people, they're like, whatever, it's just a natural body process. I don't care. And so, yeah, have sex. If you're like, yeah, that makes me feel unsexy and really gross, okay, then don't have sex. There's no reason that you have to, but there's no reason that you don't have to either. It's up to each couple for them to negotiate of, hey, how do you feel about these sort of things? You might feel great. Some people might be like, nah, let's just keep it off the table for that week that's happening. Totally up to you, something that you have to sort of navigate your comfort with, okay? Finally, we need to talk about the health of our sexual organs. Breast self-exams and vulva self-exams are really important for people who are born with breasts and vulvas. We want to be on the lookout for breast cancer, for vulva cancer, other sort of things that are going on. But in terms of breast self-exams, we also have to talk about chest self-exams for people who were born with a penis. So what we typically would say is male. Men can also get breast cancer. The harder sort of fact is that most men who get breast cancer often die from it because we don't tell men that they need to be doing breast self-exams because we have weird ideas about breasts and these sort of things. Breast tissue is just the tissue that's in your chest, and men have breast tissue in their chest. And so it's a really important sort of thing that men are also checking for breast cancer. And so there's a video on here, and then there's going to be some links to how to do chest self-exams for men as well. The last thing is to talk about genital cosmetic surgery. Again, a lot about this class is talking about big picture sort of stuff. And so we're going to talk about sort of why do we feel bad about our genitals and what do we do about those sort of things. There is a video about a labiaplasty, about a woman who feels uncomfortable with her labia, and she goes to pretty extreme measures to try and fix that. From a feminist perspective, women are allowed to do whatever they want with their bodies, right? But from also a feminist perspective, where do we get the idea that labia are ugly or too big or undesirable or all these sort of things? What I usually like to point out is, where do we see labia in society? I don't really see labia anywhere. Porn. So porn is one place that we see labia, and there have been lots of studies about porn talking about sort of the dominant view. Again, that sort of media distortion of what we feel and think about our bodies. Porn has shown us that labia that are small and taut, often called the Barbie, are the ideal kind of labia. That's weird. Labia come in a lot of different shapes, sizes, colors, waviness. They're lovely and they're wonderful. But a lot of people have gotten this message that there's only one way to have labia. And so this is an example of somebody who has done that. And so I just showed this video to say, yeah, there are these sort of things out here, but I would always have people question sort of, why do you feel that way? Is it because it's something that you've been told because of media distortion? That's something that we should think about. We also know breast augmentations, vagioplasties, other rare procedures are also on the rise. It's hard to find exact statistics because cosmetic surgeons don't like to share them. But for a lot of people, we know that cosmetic surgery has been on the rise in a lot of different ways. I'm going to stop this here because this one is focused mostly on sort of what we say female bodies, and it's a long video. And so I'll stop it here, and then I'll do a second one that's talking about sort of male bodies.